It is a land of rocky ways and stony hills and rugged mountains, and in such places the exquisite vivid bloom of the wildflowers, a profusion of delight, gay, bewilderingly bright, comes as a startling surprise. Bleak heights are carpeted in radiant colors. Every crack and crevice of a frowning crag blossoms. The contrast of this laughing, luxuriant beauty with the clear-cut, austere grandeur all around arrests the attention sharply. Elsewhere, wildflowers may be little noticed, but never in Greece. That was as true in the days of old as it is now. In the faraway ages, when the tales of Greek mythology were taking shape, men found the brilliant blossoms of the Greek spring a wonder and a delight. Those people separated from us by thousands of years, and almost completely unknown to us, felt, as we do, before that miracle of loveliness. Each flower so delicate, yet altogether covering the land like a rainbow mantle flung over the hills. The first storytellers in Greece told story after story about them, how they had been created, and why they were so beautiful. It was the most natural thing possible to connect them with the gods. All things in heaven and earth were mysteriously linked with the divine powers, but beautiful things most of all. Often, an especially exquisite flower was held to be the direct creation of a god for his own purpose. That was true of the narcissus, which was not like ours of that name, but a lovely bloom of glowing purple and silver. Zeus called it into being to help his brother, the lord of the dark underworld, when he wanted to carry away the maiden he had fallen in love with, Demeter's daughter Persephone. She was gathering flowers with her companions in the vale of Enna, in a meadow of soft grass and roses and crocus and lovely violets and iris and hyacinths. Suddenly, she caught sight of something quite new to her, a bloom more beautiful by far than any she had ever seen. A strange glory of a flower, a marvel to all, immortal gods and mortal men. 100 blossoms grew up from the roots, and the fragrance was very sweet. The broad sky above and the whole earth laughed to see it, and the salt wave of the sea. Only Persephone among the maidens had spied it. The rest were at the other end of the meadow. She stole toward it, half fearful at being alone, but unable to resist the desire to fill her basket with it, exactly as Zeus had supposed she would feel. Wondering, she stretched out her hands to take the lovely plaything, but before she touched it, a chasm opened in the earth, and out of it, coal-black horses sprang, drawing a chariot and driven by one who had a look of dark splendor, majestic and beautiful and terrible. He caught her to him and held her close. The next moment, she was being borne away from the radiance of earth in springtime to the world of the dead by the king who rules it. This was not the only story about the Narcissus. There was another, as magical but quite different. The hero of it was a beautiful lad whose name was Narcissus. His beauty was so great, all the girls who saw him longed to be his, but he would have none of them. He would pass the loveliest carelessly by, no matter how much she tried to make him look at her. Heartbroken maidens were nothing to him. Even the sad case of the fairest of the nymphs, Echo, did not move him. She was a favorite of Artemis, the goddess of woods and wild creatures, but she came under the displeasure of a still mightier goddess, Hera herself, who was at her usual occupation of trying to discover what Zeus was about. She suspected that he was in love with one of the nymphs, and she went to look them over to try to discover which. However, she was immediately diverted from her investigation by Echo's gay chatter. As she listened, amused, the others silently stole away, and Hera could come to no conclusion as to where Zeus's wandering fancy had alighted. With her usual injustice, she turned against Echo. That nymph became another unhappy girl whom Hera punished. The goddess condemned her never to use her tongue again except to repeat what was said to her. "You will always have the last word," Hera said, "but no power to speak first." This was very hard, but hardest of all when Echo, too, with all the other lovelorn maidens, loved Narcissus. She could follow him, but she could not speak to him. How then could she make a youth who never looked at a girl pay attention to her? One day, however, it seemed her chance had come. He was calling to his companions, "Is anyone here?" And she called back, in rapture, "Here, here." She was still hidden by the trees, so that he did not see her, and he shouted, "Come!" Just what she longed to say to him. She answered joyfully, "Come!" and stepped forth from the woods with her arms outstretched. But he turned away in angry disgust. "Not so," he said. "I will die before I give you power over me." All she could say was, humbly, entreatingly, "I give you power over me." But he was gone. She hid her blushes and her shame in a lonely cave, and never could be comforted. Still she lives in places like that, and they say she has so wasted away with longing that only her voice now is left to her. So Narcissus went on his cruel way, a scorner of love. But at last one of those he wounded prayed a prayer, and it was answered by the gods. "May he who loves not others love himself." The great goddess Nemesis, which means righteous anger, undertook to bring this about. As Narcissus bent over a clear pool for a drink and saw there his own reflection, on the moment he fell in love with it. "Now I know," he cried, "what others have suffered from me, for I burn with love of my own self. And yet, how can I reach that loveliness I see mirrored in the water? But I cannot leave it. Only death can set me free." And so it happened. He pined away, leaning perpetually over